They built a runway through my farm without my approval. I've spent my entire career navigating the skies, setting rules, ensuring safety, and managing airspace. Yet, here I am, staring at construction equipment cutting through the very soil my family has tended for generations. The irony isn't just striking, it's personal. I've long advocated for aviation growth, emphasizing planning, foresight, and responsibility. Still, now progress has landed squarely on my doorstep, threatening not just fields and fences, but memories, routines, and a heritage cultivated with love and sweat. Walking across the uneven ground, I can almost hear the echo of my ancestors' footsteps, a reminder of the responsibility I carry beyond my professional title. Every tractor path, every patch of soil feels suddenly fragile, and I wonder how a project meant to connect communities could disconnect me from my own roots. The tension is more than logistical. It's emotional. My family's livelihood, our history, and the quiet rhythm of farm life are at stake, intertwined with decisions made by agencies I thought I understood. I can't help but question how authority and vulnerability can coexist so starkly. How does one balance the role of protector and regulator, of parent and executive, when the very thing you've devoted your life to advancing collides with the sanctuary you've inherited? In this moment, I am forced to confront not only the disruption on the land itself, but the more profound truths about identity, responsibility, and the cost of progress when it becomes intimate, immediate, and inescapably personal. When people think of the Federal Aviation Administration, they imagine regulations, air traffic control, safety protocols, and oversight of the nation's skies. That's been my life for decades, guiding policies that affect millions of flights, thousands of pilots, and countless passengers. As the director, my days are consumed with balancing national interests, evaluating infrastructure projects, and ensuring that progress in aviation moves forward responsibly. Yet despite this authority, I am confronted with a problem far closer to home than any policy memo or advisory meeting: my own farm. The land I'm standing on carries more than just crops. It carries my family's story. My grandparents tilled this soil with determination and care, teaching lessons about patience, responsibility, and respect for the earth. My parents continued that legacy, passing down a rhythm of life intertwined with the seasons, the soil, and the community around us. I invested not only financially, but emotionally. Every seed sown and every fence repaired, a testament to commitment, stewardship, and heritage. This farm is not a commodity. It is a living chronicle of decades, a tangible reminder of where I come from, and a space where my family finds grounding, purpose, and continuity. Now that heritage is threatened by a project that, on paper, promises regional connectivity, economic growth, and broader access to the skies. The runway that slices through my land represents an impossible collision. The very field that defines my personal identity and family history is intersected by my professional world, the realm where I wield authority, set standards, and advocate for progress. How does one reconcile the responsibility to the nation with the commitment to one's own lineage? How do you protect the sanctity of home while honoring the benefits of development that could serve countless others? The tension is palpable and multi-layered, a continuous push and pull between professional duty and private life, national interests and personal values, growth and preservation. Each moment spent surveying the encroaching project is accompanied by a subtle, unrelenting question: can balance truly exist when the stakes are this intimate, this deeply personal, and yet so publicly consequential? Every conversation I've had with colleagues, stakeholders, and family members is filtered through this lens, forcing me to navigate not only the complexities of airspace and construction, but also the nuances of loyalty, heritage, and ethical responsibility. It's a challenge that tests not only my skills as a leader, but my identity as a son, a farmer, and a custodian of the land that has shaped who I am. The first time I saw the construction crews on my farm, I felt a knot tighten in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Rows of unfamiliar machinery gleamed in the morning sun, their engines humming a rhythm that seemed almost intrusive against the quiet pulse of the land I'd known my entire life. Bulldozers and graders carved lines where corn once swayed, where livestock had grazed. and where my hands had planted seeds just last season. The precision of the work was impressive, yet every movement felt like an encroachment, a silent reminder that control, even for someone in my position, is never absolute. I walked the boundaries of the project, scanning blueprints and observing the crews as they followed directives I had no hand in issuing, and I couldn't help but ask myself, how would I even handle this? The farm had always been a sanctuary of routine, where each day's rhythm followed nature's patterns rather than the tick of a corporate clock. Now, each corner of our property was threatened by noise, dust, and vibrations that would ripple across fields, disturb wildlife, and disrupt water runoff that had sustained crops for generations. The calculations I once made for safe takeoffs and landings now felt trivial compared to the real-world logistics of preserving soil, maintaining irrigation, and ensuring the animals were not traumatized by the intrusion. The stress of it weighed heavily, not just on me, but on my family. My children lingered near the edges of the field, their eyes wide, voices hushed with concern for the rows of plants they had helped nurture. My spouse's face reflected a combination of worry and quiet determination, asking questions about fencing, noise buffers, and what this would mean for the farm's legacy. We debated alternatives, weighing the potential adjustments against the inevitable disruption, knowing that every compromise came with trade-offs. Each discussion stretched the tension further, threading our personal fears with professional responsibilities that I could not ignore. As I watched the equipment move steadily forward, reshaping land that had been ours for decades, the sight became almost cinematic, the bright yellow of machinery contrasting with green fields, dust clouds trailing behind steel treads, and the long, unbroken lines of soil disrupted by deep ruts. It was a visual testament to both human ambition and the fragility of personal spaces. And yet, amid the frustration and uncertainty, a strange clarity began to form. The problem demanded not only immediate action, but thoughtful strategy, emotional resilience, and a careful balance between advocacy and compromise. Could I find a path that safeguarded the essence of the farm while acknowledging the realities of progress? Each hour on that field pressed the question harder, pushing me to consider what I valued most, what sacrifices were acceptable, and how to navigate the delicate intersection of personal investment and national obligation. It was no longer a hypothetical dilemma. It was present, tangible, and unavoidable, unfolding under my very eyes with each turn of a wheel and each plume of dust. The farm, my family, and my principles now hung in that balance, waiting for the decisions I would need to make. The first meeting with government officials was a crucible I hadn't anticipated. As the FAA director, I was accustomed to negotiations that affected air traffic patterns, airline schedules, and national policy, yet this felt different. Here, the stakes were intensely personal, intertwined with public responsibility in a way that forced every word, every decision to carry double weight. The conference room hummed with polite authority, each participant armed with timelines, blueprints, and forecasts that painted the Runway project as inevitable, even urgent. My colleagues leaned forward, outlining benefits to regional connectivity, cargo efficiency, and economic growth, their arguments steeped in statistics and projections. I listened carefully, measuring each statement against the reality of my farm, the fields that had been in my family for generations, and the quiet rhythm of life that was now threatened. How do you advocate for preservation when the very purpose of the project is progress? I asked questions that went beyond logistics, probing potential environmental impacts, wildlife displacement, and noise levels that would cascade across acres of fertile land. The tension was tangible, as if the air itself were waiting to see which direction I would tilt. Contractors pushed back, insisting that timelines could not be delayed without jeopardizing broader goals, and I felt the familiar but now jarring conflict between professional obligation and personal investment. Every compromise suggested felt like a weighing of scales, sacrifice the integrity of my property or delay a project that promised to benefit thousands. There were moments of silence, punctuated by the rustle of papers and the low hum of conversation that seemed to stretch for eternity. One particularly pointed exchange involved a proposed rerouting of equipment paths. I argued for minimal intrusion, invoking both environmental concerns and family legacy, only to have a senior official counter with economic necessity and regulatory precedence. The room tightened with suspense, everyone aware that this was more than a meeting. It was a test of judgment, empathy, and authority. I had to find a way to assert my professional credibility while protecting what was undeniably personal. We explored every alternative: temporary delays, modified construction schedules, sound barriers, wildlife corridors, and soil restoration plans. Each proposal was a negotiation, a delicate balancing act that demanded creative thinking and the courage to challenge assumptions without undermining collaboration. At times, I felt the weight of contradiction pressing on me, charged with advancing aviation safety and infrastructure, yet simultaneously defending the soil beneath my own feet. The emotional strain was constant. Family members watched anxiously, aware that my decisions would ripple beyond the conference room and into daily life on the farm. I reminded myself that leadership is not merely about enforcing rules or making expedient decisions. It is about integrating principles with compassion, strategy with empathy. By the end of the meetings, we had not achieved perfection. Still, a framework emerged, a compromise that acknowledged timelines while protecting the most critical aspects of the land. The sense of cautious progress brought relief, yet also underscored the complexity of choices that straddle public and private realms. How do you weigh the needs of thousands against the history of a single property? Each decision was a lesson in patience, negotiation, and the subtle art of harmonizing duty with devotion, leaving me acutely aware that the right choice is rarely apparent. That leadership is tested most when the stakes are deeply personal. Even as the meetings concluded and agreements were tentatively reached, the weight of the situation did not lift. I found myself alone in the quiet of the farmhouse, reflecting on the layers of responsibility that now pressed against me from all directions. On one hand, I held the authority of the FAA. This role entrusted me with safeguarding millions of lives and shaping the nation's aviation infrastructure. On the other hand, I faced the intimate, visceral reality of land that has been in my family for generations, its soil rich with history, memory, and effort. How could I reconcile these two worlds, so intertwined yet so opposed? Each evening as I walked the fields, I questioned the balance between progress and preservation. Could I justify the construction, knowing it would enhance regional connectivity, create economic opportunity, and serve countless travelers? Or would my acquiescence betray the very principles of stewardship and legacy that defined my family and myself? Conversations with my spouse were both grounding and unsettling. We debated the long-term consequences, weighing practical modifications against the emotional toll. Our children, sensing the tension, asked questions that cut straight to the heart of the dilemma. Will we still have the farm we know? Each query reminded me that the stakes were not just professional or ethical, but profoundly personal. My inner dialogue was relentless, oscillating between duty and desire, logic and emotion. I recognized the irony in my authority. Capable of directing aviation policy nationwide, yet powerless to prevent disruption on my own land without negotiation and compromise. That contrast was both humbling and instructive, forcing me to consider the weight of privilege and the limits of control. I began reframing the challenge, viewing it not as a battle to win, but as a test of stewardship, creativity, and resilience. Could progress be guided responsibly without erasing the essence of what mattered most? Could compromise preserve integrity, honor legacy, and still advance a broader good? The tension created a fertile space for reflection and growth, where moral engagement became inseparable from practical decision-making. I asked myself what I would advise someone else in this situation, knowing that every choice would ripple far beyond a single farm or single family. It became clear that leadership is measured not only by decisions made under ideal circumstances, but by the courage to navigate ambiguity with empathy, clarity, and foresight. In facing these challenges, I confronted vulnerability, responsibility, and the sometimes painful intersection of personal and public life. The farm, my family, and my principles were entwined, and the path forward demanded careful thought, deliberate action, and a willingness to accept that not every outcome could perfectly satisfy every imperative. In the silence of those moments, I understood that proper guidance is found in balancing heart and mind, heritage and progress, and that the lessons learned here would shape every choice I made going forward. Finding a path forward required a deliberate, almost surgical approach to negotiation. I knew that the stakes were not only personal, but emblematic of larger principles: progress versus preservation, duty versus legacy. The first step was to establish a common language with all parties involved, emphasizing shared goals rather than entrenched positions. Meetings with contractors, government officials, and environmental consultants became exercises in listening as much as speaking. Each conversation a delicate balance of advocacy, persuasion, and compromise. I pushed for modifications that would minimize disruption, rerouting heavy equipment away from the most fertile fields, installing temporary barriers to reduce noise impact, and creating water runoff channels to protect irrigation patterns. Environmental safeguards were non-negotiable. Wildlife corridors were mapped, soil displacement was mitigated, and construction schedules were adjusted to avoid peak farming activities. Each of these measures required negotiation, sometimes heated, always precise. I learned to measure my words carefully, to assert authority without alienating collaborators, and to recognize where flexibility could achieve far more than rigid insistence. Small victories emerged slowly but consistently. A delayed start for a particular section of the runway allowed my family to harvest critical crops. Adjusted machinery routes preserved a grove of mature trees that had been a landmark for generations. Even the noise mitigation efforts, initially seen as cumbersome by the contractors, proved effective in maintaining a sense of tranquility for the livestock and my family. These incremental successes reinforced the value of persistence, empathy, and creative problem-solving. Beyond the immediate mitigation, I realized the experience had imparted profound lessons about leadership. Actual authority does not lie solely in issuing orders or enforcing rules. It is measured by the ability to integrate competing interests, respect human and environmental considerations, and maintain integrity under pressure. Compromise is not a sign of weakness, but a tool for sustainable outcomes. Balancing responsibilities, whether to the public or one's own family, requires clarity of priorities and a willingness to navigate ambiguity without sacrificing core values. I found that the process of negotiation itself became instructive. Patience, listening, and transparent reasoning often achieved what force or insistence could not. There was a subtle empowerment in witnessing the tangible results of careful advocacy, the reassurance that the farm could continue to thrive even amid construction, and the knowledge that my professional role had been exercised in service of both progress and protection. Ultimately, the runway would be built, yet the land retained its essence. My family and I celebrated small victories not as triumphs over adversity, but as affirmations that thoughtful intervention can preserve what matters most while accommodating the inevitable march of change. These outcomes provided closure, yes, but also perspective. Leadership is rarely about absolute control. It is about guiding processes in ways that honor values, protect legacy, and still advance shared goals. In the quiet moments, walking among crops spared from disruption or seeing the livestock undisturbed by noise barriers, I felt a renewed sense of balance. Progress and preservation, authority and empathy, professional duty and personal responsibility, these dichotomies could coexist when approached with intention, respect, and determination. It was a lesson that extended far beyond this farm, offering a model for navigating complex challenges in any sphere of life. Looking back on this journey, I realize it has been far more than a story about a runway or a farm. It has been a lesson in navigating the delicate intersections between personal values and professional responsibilities. The conflict challenged not only my authority as FAA director, but also my identity as a steward of family land, forcing me to confront questions I hadn't anticipated. How do you honor heritage while embracing progress? And how do you lead with integrity when the stakes are intimately personal? Through negotiation, compromise, and deliberate reflection, we found a path that preserved critical aspects of the farm while allowing necessary development to proceed. It was not perfect, but it was thoughtful. In those small victories, I discovered the essence of balance, patience, and empathetic leadership. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a personal conflict where your professional and personal lives collided, demanding choices that tested both judgment and heart? How did you navigate that tension, and what lessons emerged for you? Sharing your experiences can help others see that such dilemmas, while difficult, are also opportunities for growth and insight. If this story resonated with you, I encourage you to engage, leave a comment, share your perspective, and explore related stories that delve into similar intersections of duty, family, and personal conviction. These narratives remind us that challenges are never isolated. They ripple through our choices, our relationships, and our understanding of what it means to act with responsibility and care. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I look forward to exploring more stories of navigating complexity, resilience, and the pursuit of meaningful solutions together.